"We are not funding this circus," my mom Sienna said. Her voice was calm, sharp, and final. With that one sentence, she erased my wedding plans and my entire future. My sister Juliet didn't even blink. "Better luck next time," she added with a smirk, as if it were a joke. My dad, Sterling, stayed silent, just like he always did when she decided who I was allowed to be. I could have screamed, but instead I just said one word: "Understood." Then I walked out. They thought I would break. They assumed I would come crawling back like always. But 3 weeks later, when their world began to collapse, they finally learned what that word really meant. It all started with a single phone call. To outsiders, my family seemed perfect, the kind people envy. We had a brick house, polished smiles, and Sunday dinners that no one dared to miss. But on the inside, every laugh came with a rule attached. My mother, Sienna, built our lives on control. How we talked, how we dressed, who we dated, and even what we dreamed about. My father, Sterling, followed her lead, the silent echo behind every one of her decisions. And my sister, Juliet, could do no wrong. When we were little girls, I wanted to design dresses. I filled notebooks with sketches of fabrics and colors. One afternoon, my mom found my drawings. She held them up as if they were evidence in a crime, and then tossed them straight into the trash. "You are not going to waste your life on fantasies," she said. My father just stood there, nodding in agreement. That was the day I learned that silence could keep the peace. Years passed, and I became what they wanted me to be, a stable, safe accountant. Juliet went to college to study marketing, which was just creative enough to sound respectable. When she opened her own boutique, my mom threw her a party bragging about her daughter's vision. I remember watching them raise a toast under twinkling string lights. Mom's pearls glowed as she said, "You've always had that spark." Spark. That word still hurts. My own spark was never allowed to exist. Then I met Nash. I met him at a community fair, the kind of event my parents called small town stuff. He worked for a non-profit organization, mentoring kids. He laughed easily and asked real questions. With him, I felt seen, not as a project, but as a person. The first time I brought him home, my mother's smile froze mid-air. "So," she said, "what do you do for a living?" When he explained, her lips curved into a polite but cold shape. "How admirable," my dad muttered. "At least he's nice." Juliet just whispered, "I guess ambition is optional," and laughed. For 3 years, Nash stood by my side, enduring their silent judgment. We planned our wedding carefully and responsibly. The Ivy House, a beautiful but modest venue, was our dream location. We saved every dollar ourselves. When my mom offered to help, I thought maybe she had changed. She said she wanted what was best for me. I should have known better. That morning, when she called me back to the house, I thought it was about flowers or catering, not about a declaration of war. The moment I walked in, I felt the tension, the silence before the final blow. My mother stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed. Juliet was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. My dad stared at the carpet. "We are not funding this circus," my mom declared. "Better luck next time," Juliet added without looking up. The words hit like a slap, sharp, humiliating, and deliberate. I felt heat rise in my eyes, but I refused to let them see it. I straightened my back. I nodded once and said, "Understood." The room fell still. My mother blinked in confusion. Juliet smiled, sure that I had given up. But what they didn't know was that my silence was no longer my surrender. The drive back to my apartment felt endless. The sky hung low, a heavy gray that made the world feel smaller. My phone buzzed the whole way. It was Nash calling, but I couldn't answer. I needed the quiet, the hum of the highway to steady myself. By the time I finally got home, my hands had almost stopped shaking. The wedding invitation was on the kitchen counter, cream-colored paper with gold trim, our names printed side by side. I stared at it for a long time before sweeping the entire stack into a box. It wasn't anger yet, just a numbness that sat in my chest like a stone. Nash arrived that evening, his face worried but calm. "What happened?" he asked. "They canceled it," I said flatly. He blinked. "Canceled? They can't do that." "They just did," I replied. "They called the venue, the florist, everything. It's over." He took a step closer, searching my face. "Do you want me to go talk to them?" I shook my head. "No. This time, it's my turn." That night, I found myself digging through an old drawer. At the very bottom was my high school sketchbook, the one my mom had thrown away years ago. The edges were bent, the pages smudged with graphite. Dresses, blazers, shoes, all the things I used to love before she told me I couldn't. I traced a design with my finger and felt something burn inside me, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Defiance. The word understood echoed in my head. Before, it meant surrender. It meant you win. But not this time. Not anymore. I thought about every understood I had ever said. When she chose my career, when she said accounting was respectable, when she told me love should look like money and status. Each understood was a piece of myself she had taken away. That night I wrote a list. Every account, every payment, every contract connected to the wedding. Something didn't add up. It was all too precise, too immediate. You don't cancel an entire event that quickly without preparation. I called the Ivy house the next morning. The coordinator hesitated before answering. "I'm sorry, Miss Perez," she said, "but your mother already sent us your signed cancellation notice." "My what?" I asked. She paused. "It had your signature on it." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my reflection in the phone's dark screen. Someone had forged my name. My family hadn't just canceled my wedding, they had erased me from it completely. The next morning, I drove straight to Mara's office. She had been my company's lawyer once, a sharp and unshakable woman who seemed like she was born in a courtroom. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or frown. She just started writing. "Show me the paperwork," she said. I gave her everything I had: payment records, invoices, the original contract from the Ivy house. Mara scanned each page, her pen tapping a steady rhythm on the desk. Then she stopped. "This cancellation form?" she murmured, holding it up. "That's not your handwriting." I leaned in closer. There was my name, sprawled in clumsy ink. My signature, but not my signature. Mara looked up, her eyes sharp. "Someone forged it. And if they used your financial information to make payments, that's a crime." The word crime hit me like a cold shock. I was no longer dealing with just manipulation. This was theft, deliberate and calculated. We spent hours going over the details, every transaction, every withdrawal from the wedding account. That's when we saw it. Thousands of dollars transferred to Juliette Perez Designs, her boutique. Another trail led to payments on my parents' credit cards and to home renovations. "They used your money to cover their debts," Mara said, "and I bet it's even worse than this." That night, I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop the only light. I replayed every moment in my head: my mother's cold tone, Juliet's smirk, my father's silence. It all clicked into place. The wedding wasn't just a power play, it was a smokescreen. The next day, my phone rang. My Uncle Elias's name appeared on the screen. We hadn't spoken in months, but his voice sounded tense and uncertain. "Isla, there's something you need to know," he said. "It's about your grandfather's trust fund." I froze. "What about it?" "He set it up years ago. 250,000 pesos. It's yours, but it only activates when you get married. Your parents have been managing it and withdrawing money. I checked the records myself." The air left my lungs. "Are you saying they've been using the money for years?" "Isla," Elias said quietly, "Juliet's business, the house remodel. It all came from the trust. If you had gotten married, it would have triggered a full audit. They had to stop it." I covered my mouth with my hand. My own family hadn't just robbed me, they had destroyed my future to keep their secret hidden. After the call, I sat motionless for a long time. The anger came slowly, quietly, like a storm building over still water. I opened my laptop and typed a message to Mara. "We're filing the lawsuit." Then I whispered to no one but myself, "They wanted control. Now they'll get consequences." The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Rows of strangers murmured behind me, the hum of the air conditioning drowning out my own heartbeat. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Mara, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. Across the aisle, my family looked smaller than I remembered. My mother's hair was perfect as always, but her pearls didn't shine the same under the fluorescent lights. My father's tie was crooked. Juliet scrolled on her phone until the bailiff told her to stop. When the judge entered, we all stood. "Case number 4721, Perez versus Perez," the clerk announced. The words hurt more than I expected. Mara began calmly. "Your Honor, this case is about the unauthorized use of my client's financial assets and a forged signature on legally binding documents. We will show that Isla Perez not only suffered interference from her parents and sister in her wedding plans, but also the misappropriation of her inheritance." My mother leaned toward her lawyer, whispering something sharp. She didn't like losing control of the narrative. Mara laid everything out. The forged cancellation form, the bank withdrawals, the payments funneled to Juliet's boutique. She handed copies to the judge, each page landing with a soft, deliberate thud. Then came the trust fund. My Uncle Elias took the stand, looking uncomfortable in his suit. My father, Isla's grandfather, set up a trust of 250,000 pesos for her. It was to be released upon her marriage. I recently discovered discrepancies. "Who withdrew the money?" Mara asked. He swallowed. "Sterling and Sienna Perez." A murmur went through the room. My mother's lawyer objected. "Immaterial. The trust was handled within familial rights." Mara's tone remained even. "Familial rights do not cover fraud." My mother's eyes locked onto mine, sharp and cold. "You don't understand, Isla. We were trying to protect you. That boy, Nash, is beneath you. He would have dragged you down." I looked right back at her. "Protect me by stealing from me?" Her voice cracked. "We only used what we needed. Juliet was drowning in debt. We couldn't let her fail." "Maybe you should have," I said softly. "Maybe it would have taught her what responsibility means." Juliet slammed her hand on the table. "You think you're better than us? You've always been the boring one. Our parents did everything for you." The judge banged his gavel once. "Order!" Mara looked at Juliet. "Miss Perez, your parents transferred expenses for your boutique from Isla's trust fund." Juliet hesitated, her confidence fading. "I didn't know where the money came from." "Really?" Mara held up a document. "Because this invoice for your boutique's renovation has your father's signature and the account number for Isla's trust." The color drained from Juliet's face. By the time Mara finished her presentation, every secret was on the table. My mom tried to play the martyr, my dad mumbled half-hearted apologies, and Juliet cried into a tissue she barely used. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was firm, cold, and definitive. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. All funds misappropriated from the trust must be repaid immediately. Furthermore, the defendants are ordered to pay 50,000 pesos in damages for fraud and emotional distress." My mother's breath hitched. My father's shoulders slumped. Juliet just stared at me in pure disbelief. I didn't smile or gloat. I just exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, the sky was clear, a rare, scenic blue. There were no reporters, no crowds, just silence. Mara turned to me. "You did it." "I just stopped them," I said. Nothing more. A week later, I was back at the Ivy House, standing under the same archway where my mother's words had once haunted me. But now, it was mine. The garden lights twinkled softly over tables draped in simple, elegant white cloths. Nash waited for me at the end of the aisle, his tie a little crooked, his smile steady. Griffin waved from the second row. My Uncle Elias nodded with pride, and Mara, who almost never smiled, did. As the music started, I felt my throat tighten. There was no mother to fix my veil, no father to walk me down the aisle. It was just me walking myself forward. Each step felt like taking back something that had been stolen. When I reached Nash, he whispered, "Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay," I said, and I truly meant it. We said our vows quietly, not for show, not for anyone else. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. For a moment, all I could hear was the wind in the ivy and the distant sound of laughter. Real laughter. After the ceremony, I slipped away for a second under the same oak tree where I had once cried when everything fell apart. I looked at the lights and thought about how silence had become my weapon. My mother had once called my wedding a circus. Now it was peace. Inside, music and warmth filled the air. Nash took my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. The world became a blur of faces and lights. When the night was over, I wrote one last email. It was simple and clean. Sienna, Sterling, and Juliet, the court showed me who you are. I wish you the best, but this is goodbye. I hesitated for a second, then hit send. Outside, the crickets chirped. Nash wrapped his arm around me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. A few weeks later, the calls started. First my mom, then my dad, then Juliet. Each one left a voicemail that sounded the same. Soft voices, forced apologies, a tremble meant to inspire pity. "We just want to talk, honey. Can we please see you? Things got out of hand." I didn't answer. The phone would buzz on the counter while I folded laundry, cooked dinner, and lived my life. Each vibration felt weaker than the last. Then the voicemail came that made me stop. It was my mother's voice, brittle and tired. "Your father lost his job, Juliet's boutique. It's gone. We're trying to start over. We need help." I stared at the wall, no longer angry, just empty. They had taken enough from me. I later learned the full story. My dad was fired after a scandal. My mom was working part-time at a department store. Juliet was drowning in debt. The same people who once dictated my life couldn't even keep their own afloat. One night, the calls started again, over and over, my screen lighting up with their names. I picked up the phone, slowly typed out a single message, and sent it. "The circus is already full." Then I set the phone face down, poured myself a glass of wine, and went back to sketching under the soft kitchen light. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, warm and calm. Nash kissed my forehead before he left for work, and I sat at my desk, surrounded by fabric swatches and half-finished designs. My first clothing line was taking shape. Mine, not theirs. Freedom didn't feel loud. It felt quiet, steady, and earned. I glanced at the phone on the table. No new calls, no new apologies, just silence. A silence that finally meant peace. My mother once said my wedding was a circus. Maybe she was right, because now the show was over, and I was the one walking away smiling. If you've ever had to choose yourself over your family, tell me in the comments. Subscribe. There's always another story to tell.